Hey,
So
everybody.
you just let me know when you're done. We'll start. It's on Chris's time.
Boom. Hey, guys.
I'm.
Who's periscoping?
How many people here are using Periscope?
Who's Facebook Living? Who's
So what
just
do you think
keeping
about
this for
the
their own
future of live
posterity to show their
streaming?
grandmas or something like that? There's just a lot of cameras going. All right, I love it. Thanks.
So I was excited to interview you because I think your path is so interesting, and I know a lot of folks here know you now as who you are, as Chris Sacca, who wears these cool shirts. But before this, you were working at a law firm. You were at Google.
Seriously, wait, that's got to come with a trigger warning. You can't just bring up working at a law firm and not.
You worked at a law firm, you made your way to Google, and you became one of the most successful angel investors. So if you could kind of pinpoint, you know, it almost seems like you always used a job you were at as kind of like a holding place for the job you wanted. What was it? How did you make that leap?
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about it as kind of leverage for the next job necessarily. I think that one of the things I look for in our best entrepreneurs, and that has connected our best entrepreneurs over time, whether it's Travis or Evan Williams or Kevin Systrom, is they just believe in the inevitability of their success. Like even when there's a setback, they don't wallow in it because they just know it's going to work out. And I don't mean they're there to sell you and convince you it's going to work out. They just know it. And strangely, in the back of my mind, I just always knew it was going to work out. I mean, I had a huge setback in the spring of 2000 where I went from $12 million net worth on paper to negative $4 million in a matter of days. And it sucked. I'm not going to say I didn't fucking punch the wall, but I just knew I would dig out of that, and I knew it would work out, and I knew that somehow I would get out of a debt hole bigger than like the money I originally as a kid thought I would ever make in the world, and then I would go on and make something else.
When I asked a lot of the people who know you well, tell me about Chris. Like, what should I ask him on stage? And everyone.
Are you going to disclose their names? I want to know who's talking
No,
about
no,
me.
I'm not. That's on background. But a lot of people talked about your attention to detail, and that you have so much attention to detail when it comes to entrepreneurs and how you look at investments. So, what were the details that made you want to invest in, say, the founders of Instagram or Uber? Can you give us some specifics?
Yeah, I mean, I think my attention to detail comes up more when we start working together. I mean, my wife and I just finished building a house that took 4 years to build, and it's not a huge house. It's just we're absolutely obsessive about the way that wood meets that wood meets that wood in that corner, and so you might not get it from the shirts, but I really do care about aesthetics. I care about every pixel on the site. I care about simplicity. I think making things simple is one of the hardest things to do in the world. People underestimate simplicity because it doesn't look like it took that much effort, but taking stuff away from an app, taking stuff away from a site makes it work that much better, makes it easier for users, makes you make a lot more money, but it's the hardest thing to do. And so I do obsess over detail like that. But I think often that doesn't come up in the initial phase of getting into an Uber. I mean, Uber, Travis was an old buddy. I knew he had a lot of hustle. I knew he had a lot of drive and ambition. He has that inevitability of success. I mean, in the earliest days when he is pulling 8-hour sessions in our hot tub up in Truckee, we were talking about international expansion, and I think there were probably 3 cars in the network already. We were talking about moving food and packages around in 2009. And in parallel, I don't know if you know this story. Do you guys know the Nintendo Wii story? So it's New Year's Day, 2010, I believe. Travis, the CEO of Uber, and we are sitting around my house. We're a little hungover from the night before, and my dad challenges Travis to a game of Nintendo Wii tennis. And Travis is like, "Okay, Mr. Sacca." And so my dad's up, like taking swings and like working up a sweat, and Travis is holding a remote and just doing this, and he's beating up on my dad. And my dad's like, "What the hell is this?" And like after a couple games losing, my dad's visibly frustrated. He's like, "I'm sorry, Mr. Sacca," but in like a Princess Bride moment, he's like, "I'm not actually right-handed." And then, and my dad doesn't score another point again. He's like, "What the?" And Travis, bleary-eyed, is literally like, "Okay, Mr. Sacca, here, bear with me for a second." And he pages over to the global leaderboard, and Travis, while being CEO of Uber, is ranked number 2 in the world at Wii tennis.
So is there like a common trait? And are they all the kind of people that could kind of annihilate your dad and tennis?
Can I ask you, would you ever want to compete with Travis Kalanick after hearing that story?
I mean, in general, no, I would not want to compete with
By the way, he is,
Travis.
you know Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
Yeah, of course.
Travis was Dr. Sanjay Gupta's Angry Birds coach. So Travis mastered Angry Birds too. Like had 3 stars all the way through. And Sanjay had a couple of levels he couldn't get through. So Travis coached Sanjay. It's a true story.
You meet some of the, okay, so you meet these entrepreneurs before they become the big names, right? The founders of Instagram,
Hopefully,
Uber,
hopefully.
Stripe.
Otherwise they get a lot more expensive.
What is the trait that you can kind of pull out that's the common thread with a lot of these people?
Yeah, there's a confidence without needing to sell, right? So there's this really fine line between like a conceit and just exuding a confidence. So, I find that my career really started to take off when I just got the attitude like, look, I'm not here to convince you anymore. Like, if you're not on board, that's fine. We'll talk about it later, and it'll be more expensive then. But as a result, I find like, I had a conversation with Kevin Systrom, the Instagram founder, and we were talking about the future of the product, and he once said, so when we get to 50 million users, that'll be a good time to roll out this other thing. And I'm like, stop right there. We are sitting in a co-working space in San Francisco, and you are alone. There is nobody else on the team at this point. And you're talking about 50 million users someday? And he wasn't trying to convince me. He wasn't trying to sell me. There was no there was no hand waving or anything like that. He just said it so calmly, he believed it. And it was magnetic. It was alluring. I had already made money in photos once. I know it sounds funny in retrospect, but everyone's like, Jesus, photos have been done. Who's ever gonna make any money in photos again? But I was just like, I can't not be involved in that guy's company. I have this with a founder named Shivani Saroya who runs InVenture for us, who every bias that you have, whether you're a man or a woman, would kind of immediately, it's just embedded, you would discount her. She's a small Indian woman with a high voice, and you just be like, come on, she can't be a Titan. But she's a fucking slayer. And the company she's building is not only gonna be our next unicorn, but when she initially was talking to me, I was like, hey, who coded this? Which again, implicit in my voice was like, you're a woman, you didn't code this, right? I mean, not even realizing that bias. And she's like, I did. I'm like, wait, your resume doesn't say you're a computer scientist. She's like, what the fuck, Chris? It's not that hard. I taught myself, I'm just like, oh my God. And so having done this for a bunch of years now and having a lot of data points, I've realized I can just tell, I can smell it on them now, whether they're gonna go the distance or not.
Let's look at kind of your startups. Treat them as children, right? You've got Uber, Stripe, Instagram. I know you love them all. Is there any that right now you see a lot of potential, a little more potential? Any that's kind of disappointing you?
I know Instagram moved out of the house too early. I was really sad. It should have stuck around for a little while. Instagram could have bought Facebook someday. But Uber is the company I work on the least because they just continue to execute so well. I hope they continue to work on the warm and fuzzies and some of the human issues they have there, but there isn't a company working on a bigger contiguous math problem ever in history. Nobody has more data, nobody's smarter about what to do with it, and I'm just fascinated. I'm like a fan rather than working on it that much.
What could they do on the human front? I
mean, they just need to be better at telling their story. This is a company that is materially saving tens of thousands of lives every year. Like that's not a selling or a pitch point, it's just their data on that, independent now. They move into a town and drunk driving fatalities go down. Like I'm fucking proud of that, right? And so I hate every now and then when some executive there says something that could be interpreted as misogynist or insensitive, et cetera. That sucks. It's not really reflective of our brand and our values. But I will pound the table with pride that they save lives. And so I hope they can just get better at telling that story. The Stripe guys, have you met Patrick and John?
Yeah, of course.
They're the 2 smartest people on the planet.
And very understated too, right?
Well, they're Irish, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there's a bunch of people, staff members here will appreciate that. Yeah, I hear one. Right on. Sláinte. But Patrick and John have these weird photographic memories. In fact, for the Wikipedia, like they don't forget a Wikipedia entry if they've read it. And I went into their offices once and I brought in an investor to invest in Stripe directly, and he had just been to Treasure Island. I was like, oh yeah, Treasure Island, I think that was a military base once. And John Collison walked into the room, the younger brother, and without even introducing himself to the other guy, was like, no. And, and in 1946, it was the site of the World Expo, and then it was deeded over to the blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what in the hell? This has nothing to do with Stripe whatsoever, but their minds are like a sieve for facts. And the ambition of that company, though, the Atlas product they just launched that enables anybody anywhere in the country to, with one push of a button for a couple $100, incorporate in the United States, establish a bank account, be able to receive payment in the United States. Like, that just requires people who are living in the future.
Right.
These guys aren't in the present right now. They are years ahead of us reporting back.
When I found out I was interviewing, I put out on Twitter, and a lot of folks tweeted at me. They wanted to know your thoughts on Jack Dorsey as a CEO, because you've been such a big advocate for him and for Twitter, right? What are your thoughts on his progress about almost a year later?
I mean, Twitter is just a series of missed opportunities. That's just my kid who I keep walking in their room and finding like the big pile of drugs under the mattress and be like, come on, you could have been somebody, you know? Like,
what's the biggest missed opportunity when you're screaming at your kid in the room with the drugs on the...
I mean, Twitter has all of the world's best information. No matter who you are in this room, it has cool shit that you want to know about it, And it has it faster than anybody else on the planet. And they do the worst job of getting you that. It's so much work as a user to see stuff. So I'm going to plug my own book, but we have a company called Nuzzle that it's scientifically not a hard company. It looks at your Twitter graph and pulls out the URLs that everybody's talking about and builds your own personalized Google News page that's based on what all of your friends and the people you follow are talking about. It's absolutely awesome. So if you've been away from Twitter, you've been busy at this conference today, you don't know what happened, go download NUZZEL, and you'll see this is the stuff that happened. Here's who got bought, this is what launched, here's the latest controversy. It's absolutely amazing. And it's just shameful that it doesn't exist inside Twitter right now.
What do you think ultimately happens? Do you want to lay down?
Malaise. I know, seriously. I feel like I need to pay you for this session now.
We're getting into that part, Chris.
Yeah, it's years. I mean, when I posted 8,500 words on what Twitter should be, I wanted to make clear this wasn't like a vision statement for the future. What was so frustrating about it is that's what it should have been already. Like, I don't consider myself to have a lot of future vision. It's not my strong suit. In fact, I'm often, like Evan Williams sees into the future. There's no doubt about it. 3 years ago, he was pounding the table like, we got to do stuff in live video. He just knew it was coming. And often, like when they launched the retweet button instead of doing manual retweets, he'd run something by me and be like, that's a fucking disaster. And he's like, good, we're on to something. You know, like he just knows if I hate it, maybe it's right. But with that thing I wrote about Twitter, it was just like, look, these are ideas we've been talking about for years. It's weird that Twitter makes it so hard to follow the basketball game when everybody's there talking about the basketball game. It's so hard to follow the debate. It's so hard to find the best shit that just happened in the hour that you were here ostensibly paying attention. And so that just frustrates the hell out of me.
People follow you, and they always expect you to speak your mind, especially in Silicon.
Sorry, I haven't done so today.
Yeah, especially in Silicon Valley, where everyone is killing it, crushing it, and it's hard sometimes to get people to really kind of open up. I mean, you are unforgivingly who you are. Have you always been like that?
No.
What happened?
Like when I was in college.
What were you like? Like, were you ever insecure?
I still am insecure. Like that. I mean, there's probably people snickering backstage right now at that question. Like, when I was in college, I didn't want to come out as a progressive because I would eliminate like half of my future employers in Washington, D.C. I was like, look, I got to look neutral here so I can get a fucking job someday. I found progressively, and some of these lessons were foisted upon me. I mean, I mentioned earlier, so not to repeat a story, but as at Google, I am working on this team and this wireless stuff. It was an incredible amount of responsibility. Larry Page had given me billions of dollars to go take on the wireless carriers. And I was in over my head. I didn't have a background on this stuff, and I was learning fast, and I was pretty good at it. But one day a decision came up, and I didn't know what to do. And my work partner wrote in the notes, Chris doesn't know what to do about this. And at Google, the notes are published to the whole company. So I see the notes get published, and I'm like, what'd you do? You just ruined my career. Everyone's going to know, like, I'm smoking mirrors. And I thought it was over for me. And then the next meeting, some new engineers who didn't report to me and Larry Page himself showed up with ideas on what to do to solve this problem. And I was like, oh my God, I just became more powerful. I now have influence. I have more bodies working for me who don't even report to me. And it was, I wish I could say it was an enlightened choice I'd made. It was totally foisted upon me and I was angry about it, but it worked. And so along the way, I realized that the candor, the authenticity, the vulnerability is what actually attracts the other people to you. It's the insecurity roots you in this place of showing you're impervious, that you've got all the answers. But what that does is it renders everyone around you helpless. They're just like, fuck, I'm not valued here, right? And so when you start to admit, like, I don't know what I'm doing, I need some help, then people start attracting you and working with you. I mean, I have a principle that I guide my life by, and I try and teach this to our entrepreneurs, called bold humility. There are all these business books that say, like, hey, be humble, be humble, be humble. But humility is not a natural state for a kick-ass human being, right? Like, if you're here, you probably kick a lot of ass at something. You're probably the best at something. You have ambition. You're a risk taker. You have learned to hack. You're a good talker. You have, through the gift of gab, wound your way into an amazing situation. You hustle, hustle, hustle. And I feel like it's unnatural to apologize for that. But where we get into trouble is when we feel like we have to extend that to the shit we don't know. And we have to feel like we've got it all covered. And so I think I have had such a great, like, I don't know if I would have learned this authenticity if I didn't have Twitter and the replies being like, that means a lot to me, go for it, you know? And that's why I kind of live a lot of my life in public, as I feel I draw a lot of strength and reassurance from the public being like, look, that moment of fucking failure meant a lot to me and I identify with it.
Because you live your life in public and because you're on the therapy couch right there, do you feel this pressure to keep winning now that you have these big wins? You know, in the news business, they say you're only as good as your last hit, your last segment, which is like, come on. But does that translate?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I gave my fund away to my partner, Matt Mazzeo, a couple years ago. So when you want to come pitch me, just pitch Mazzeo, M-A-Z-Z-E-O. Mazzeo is an amazing talent. I realized I needed to give it away when I said no to Snapchat. Those guys came up to me after a talk I gave, and they're like, we really like the way you work. We love your values. We want to collaborate with you. Would you invest in our company? And I'm like, the dick pics? And that probably cost me like $1 billion, you know?
Snapchat was the one that got away?
Yeah. But I realized I was losing my edge. Like, I've never swiped left and right. I didn't Vox and shit like that. Like, I'm really bad at filters still. Right. But I also, there's only so much money you can make. Like, extra money doesn't buy you a closer relationship with your wife or more normal kids. In fact, it probably means you have to work harder on your kids being normal and not assholes. And no, I'm serious. Like, how many rich kids do you know that aren't total fucking disasters? Right?
So we got to wrap it soon, but a couple more. I mean, what?
You've never been one to play by rules.
That's so true. That was like a reminder that I'm going to keep going.
Watch this. Should we keep it going a little bit?
Should keep it going. I know, I don't play by rules.
Stage manager.
Sorry, Patty.
Yeah.
Just don't make eye contact. What problems should technology be solving? Because I've seen a lot of like apps to help you with your dry cleaning and all that kind of stuff. But every time I say that I don't think an app's going to do well, it turns into like Uber, and that's why I'm not an investor and I'm sitting here talking to you.
No. What's funny? So Uber, Travis always knew that Uber was going to start for rich white people, and then replace everything else in the stack.
So because
that's where the big market is, right?
So other problems tech should be solving. What are the most pressing problems that you want entrepreneurs to go out and solve?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some amazing books like Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid that talk about the combined spending power of everybody on the lower end of the traditional economic pyramid, you know, the spectrum, that there are these incredibly ignored constituencies. There's one, I don't know if you've heard of them, called women. So, like, women have all this purchasing power, all this decision-making influence, all these things that they're passionate about, et cetera, and it turns out people spend a fuck ton of money on kids and all this stuff, and nobody is really building companies them because white dudes build companies right now, right? So there's like 18 Ubers for yachts, and I'm super glad that all those blue blood prep school guys have that service available to them. But people ignore Atlanta and Houston and Chicago and New Orleans and all these cities where real Americans live. And so I think this is, I have a greed case for diversity. I actually think like diversity is great. We have a moral obligation. We should do it for the right reasons. Our country owes people of color a couple hundred years of making up for how we treated them. Our country is decades and decades behind on women. But even if you didn't believe any of that shit, if you're the coldest, like most steely venture capitalist, or as Boehner called Cruz today, Lucifer in the flesh, like there is a greed case for diversity. Because diverse perspectives bring us into markets we didn't know existed. They bring us into beauty. They bring us into travel. They bring us into content. Like, Twitter is black Twitter. Like, that is a brand that Black Twitter has given itself, and that's where the creative shit happens. That's where the hashtags happen. Like, that's where the excitement is. And yet, there's no Black member on Twitter's board. There's no Black executive at Twitter. It's fucked up.
Their head of diversity is not.
Their head of diversity is not Black,
right,
or a woman. And so, how do you even make that call, right? You're like, are we being punked? Where's Ashton? Come on out, Ashton. Like, but I just feel like there are these incredibly underserved markets. There are markets who here knows that Kenya's banking system is about 10 years ahead of ours? Like, everything you can do in Kenya on your phone, you can borrow money on your phone, you can pay money on your phone, you can purchase everything using your phone and text messages there. Like, it's embarrassing how far ahead they are. Like, we have a company there called InVenture run by Shivani, who's the slayer, but Americans don't know that. We don't travel outside our country. We don't hang out with people who don't look like us. We don't hang out with people from, we don't bring these diverse voices into our companies, and as a result, we're losing money.
Last question, because I think they might actually physically remove me from the stage. You're looking out at an audience full of entrepreneurs.
Well, the lights are kind of bright, so
okay, so I think that how many people here are entrepreneurs, building companies? Okay, so a lot of folks. What's your advice to these folks who are kind of at maybe beginning, middle stage, just building these companies, in the weeds?
In 17 seconds?
And about probably like 13 now.
Let's put every podcast that I've ever, okay. We might have to have one more question because this isn't going to be the most uplifting thing
all right,
I've ever
Patty,
heard.
you heard it from him, not me.
Some of you aren't founders, and you should fucking admit that to yourselves. So it's become very fashionable to start something. It's amazing, when Justin Timberlake plays somebody in a movie about a startup, that's awesome. There are lots of people making a ton of money and on magazine covers, but this is a very special, different journey that is not actually suited to everybody. You have to be a little fucked up. You have to be a little weird, a little crazy, a little obsessive. You probably have some personal issues that make you different. Like, you have some demons a little bit. You may have trouble relating to other human beings from time to time. Like, you don't accept failure very well. Maybe you go off a little bit. Maybe you struggle a little bit with manic depression, etc. Like, if none of those things sound familiar to you, you should probably quit right now. So, sorry if that's a little bit of a downer, but some of you should be employees. Some of you should be partners. Some of you should be employee number one at a startup. And I think right now, oh, that's amazing. They actually showed us a hurry up, please sign.
Yep. Yeah, I know. But that's good. But finish the thought, because I think that's powerful and people should hear that.
No, there are founders and then there are team members. And in an era where it's been so easy to get capital, I just think the posers should step aside.
And make way. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Jeez, that's such a fucking downer, though, right?
But yeah.